All right, hi. Welcome, good evening. My name is Lynn Kamenitsa, and I, along with Mike Poirier, am a co-chair of the Imagine OPRF work group. I'd like to welcome you to our fifth round of community conversation meetings about facilities at OPRF. So we have two goals tonight. The first is for you all to understand our plan, and the second is for us to gather feedback as we prepare our final recommendation that's going to go to the Board of Education. Here's the format for the evening. You see the agenda up there. Mike and I are each going to give you some background information about the Imagine process. Then there's going to be a short video about some of the needs we found in the building. Several team members are going to walk you through some highlights of the plan, and then we'll open the floor for your questions at the end. I do want to say a little bit about the question and answer. At previous meetings, we've been comparing different versions, so we've had stations set up all around this room, and every person has been able to get their question answered by an individual team member because we asked them at those stations. Now that we're down to one plan, that format does not work as well. So we're going to be doing it all here together. So, we're going to be gathering your feedback in 4 different ways. First, you can write your questions on index cards. Greg Johnson will be waving. He can pass you extras, and he can also collect them. You can do that during the evening while team members are speaking. And we're going to group those so that we can answer them for efficiency. Please, only one question per card. You can write as many cards as you want, but please only one question per card so it's easier for us to sort and we don't miss any of your questions. Secondly, you can ask your question verbally tonight. We do ask that you keep your questions brief as a courtesy to others who would also like to ask their questions. Third, there are paper feedback forms that you should have gotten when you came in. They're the ones with the big empty boxes on them. You're free to leave more detailed or nuanced feedback using that paper form. Just make sure you drop it off as you leave tonight. And fourth, that same form will be available online. In fact, I think it's available now online, and we will put up the URL for that at the end of the evening, and you can fill that out anytime in the next couple of days. I do want to remind you that our plan tonight is a draft plan. It is not the final plan, and sometimes we'll say draft, and sometimes we'll just say plan because it's a lot to say every single time. And now Mike is going to share some background about the Imagine team, our process, and our work product.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Mike. I want to talk to you, first of all, before I get into this, I'd like to just see if the mic doesn't work, the feedback does.
Talk louder. Just talk louder, Mike.
Just talk louder. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Before I get into the content of this, I would just like to see a show of hands of the people that are here for the first community engagement meeting tonight. Great. Okay. Well, this will be definitely worth your one. Let's see if I can figure out how this works. There we go. What I want to talk about very briefly, just give you a highlight of the Imagine team composition, the Imagine team work process that we followed, and the Imagine team work product. The Imagine team started out as the...
Louder, Mike. Stay close to the microphone.
The Imagine team started out as the brainchild of our superintendent, Dr. Pruitt Adams, who in December of 2016 went to the Board of Education and requested the establishment of this team, which the board approved. And then in the following spring, a launch team was appointed. There's the 8 members of the launch team. And those are the people that selected from among 90 applicants. Everybody who lived in Oak Park and River Forest at the time was sent a request to submit an application if they were interested in serving on the Imagine team. We got 90 responses. And from those 90, this group of 8 people, community members, a couple of faculty members and one staff member from the school, selected the 33 community members for the team. The Imagine team membership, without getting into all the names because that fills a couple of PowerPoint slides, but about 2/3 of them are sitting over to your right front. and I encourage you to spend some time meeting and getting to know them. There's 30 community members. In addition to that, Dr. Pruitt-Adams selected 10 faculty and staff members from the high school to serve with the team, and that rounded out the entire group. Sorry, I'm going to back up one. I want to talk next about the work process that we used. It was, at least in hindsight, pretty straightforward. It started with a fairly intensive research phase. We spent a lot of time, several months, and I don't expect you to read all this. I'm not going to read it to you. But we spent a lot of time understanding what we have here at this school and understanding the capability of what the current systems and the current facilities provide. We then went into an assessment and planning phase to determine what are the current and future needs, and where are the gaps between the future needs and the current capabilities. This then went into a phase we called idea generation, where we came up with ideas and concepts as to how the problems might be solved and issues addressed. That led to proposal development, which was aggregating and integrating the ideas to form a plan, and then that yielded logically proposal refinement, and that's where we are tonight. Finally, I'd just like to say a few words about a master plan, and it applies to this one without getting into the content of this one. The term master plan can be used to describe a wide range of things. As it applies to this one, it is a comprehensive conceptual representation as to how solutions to facilities problems would be implemented over time. It shows the approximate location for major components and notes the order in which the components either must be done or in some cases are preferred to be done. It is not a construction plan. It does not have enough detail to be a construction plan. Another important element is that agreement to the master plan constitutes agreement in concept, not a commitment to execute every element of the plan or all of its components. And most importantly, the plan is dynamic. It should be reviewed regularly and modified as appropriate to reflect new learnings which are certain to come up during its execution. Okay, now we have a very short video to show you to illustrate just a few of the issues that we discovered during the original phase of our work.
Okay, we're going to wait and let this load, and I'm going to jump ahead to another thing. Most of it will still make sense. Most of it will still make sense even though you haven't seen the video. A few parts might not make as much sense without having seen the video. I want to talk for a minute about facilities and equity, which that's what the slide would say if it were up there. The America to Me documentary series has rightfully increased public awareness of inequity, particularly racial inequity, at Oak Park and River Forest High School. That has understandably led to questions about how the school can be considering investing in facilities when equity issues are so urgent. So I want to take a few minutes and talk about the ways that Imagine sees facilities and equities being overlapping and interwoven issues, not separate issues. So at our very first meeting, Imagine committed to viewing our work through an equity lens, and we have done so throughout the process. Our research uncovered facilities-related equity issues around several different dimensions, around gender, disability, race, class, and other marginalized statuses, which basically refers to kids who for one reason or another are picked on, or anxious, or bullied, or ostracized. So a few of these dimensions of inequity are addressed in really clear, straightforward ways in our plan. So here are two examples of how it can be straightforwardly addressed. ADA accessibility in the building is lacking. Our plan makes the entire building ADA accessible to all students and thus reduces inequity based on accessibility, or based on disability. And the facilities, secondly, the facilities do not meet the needs of gender expansive students, including transgender students. And our plan creates changing rooms and restrooms that equitably meet the privacy needs of all students. So those are pretty straightforward ways that we address equity. It requires a little more explanation to see how the ways that the plan addresses equity when it's related to race or class or marginalized status. We believe that is woven throughout the whole plan. I'm going to give you 4 examples of that. So here are 4 ways that this plan addresses equity for those partially overlapping 3 groups. First, students in general, and students of color in particular, told us that they want to spend more time in the building. And national research demonstrates a positive link between the number of hours in the building and student learning. But our school does not have adequate spaces for students to spend those extra hours on campus safely in an area that can be easily monitored. Our plan creates those spaces when we build the commons, which you'll hear about later. Secondly, economically disadvantaged students lack access to all sorts of resources at home. Things like printers, but also things like quiet study spaces, or places to do group projects, or tutors, or instruments, or equipment. These are all things that Imagine found were lacking for some students. The Imagine plan helps even out the access to those resources because we bring them to the center of the building. We create more of them, we bring them to the center of the building, and once they're in the center of the building, they can be accessed for longer hours. And we'll talk about that a little more later. Third, students of color told us that they feel unwelcome in a school where there are too few spaces for them to gather during and especially after school. They are constantly being asked, where do you need to be? Our plan creates welcoming spaces for those groups of students where they are encouraged to gather in the heart of the school, so that the answer to where do you need to be becomes, I need to be right here in my school where I belong. And fourth, America to me has shown the importance of extracurricular activities in connecting kids to the school and in helping kids find a home in a big institution. This is important for all students, but it's particularly important for those who already feel unwelcome or feel marginalized. That's one reason that Imagine's plan prioritizes flexible learning spaces, that is flexible classroom spaces that can be building-wide, that can also be used outside of school hours for arts, athletics, and extracurriculars. Marginal facilities affect all students, but they disproportionately affect students who are already behind academically when they arrive, who lack outside resources, or who already feel marginalized. In turn, those same students are the ones who benefit disproportionately from facilities improvements. So I'm not claiming that facilities are some magic wand that's going to provide equity for all at OPRF and fix all of our problems. But I do believe that facilities are an essential part of OPRF's path to equity. Equity and facilities are related issues and must be part of the same conversation. How's it looking for the video? Yes, no, maybe? Should we just go on? Are you sure there's no chance we're going to have it?
There's a chance it's not going to be soon.
Just not soon. Okay. We'll keep going. It's a little hard to talk about the solutions before you've seen some of the problems, but we're flexible. We're all about flexibility. We can do that. Okay. So the plan. I mentioned earlier that it's technically still a draft. I mentioned to some of you as you were looking at the boards, this is a single plan. We're not talking about 5 separate options. What we're talking about is a single plan that has 5 sequences or phases. The architects like us to call them sequences. We like to call them phases. And it takes place, it's basically a roadmap for development over the next 10 years. The fastest it can be done is 6 years. That's unlikely. It's more likely going to be 10 years. Each of the 5 sequences is a standalone thing. Okay. So even if other sequences are delayed, or even if they are never built, the school is essentially whole after each sequence. We can meet all students' needs after each sequence. We're not going to go into too much detail because the plan is so huge and there's so many details and we would just bore you all to death. So rather than go through every problem and every component, I'm going to have a few Imagine team members come up to share some of the big issues that we prioritize and the big components that address them. Unfortunately, we need the rest of the PowerPoint to do that, gentlemen.
Okay, well.
Can we put it back while it's buffering? Okay. So if you want more detail, feel free to ask that. Some of it's on the back of the handout you received, and you also we're happy to answer questions later in the question and answer. Okay, if all of my presenters can come over to this side of the room, it will save us time in between, although it turns out now we're killing time. Okay, so we've done equity already. We'll come back to that later. Chapter. Now, oh, there we go. That's supposed to be there. Okay, so I'm going to start. I'm just going to do a brief part. The first of the big ideas that we're talking about is the idea of the student commons, a welcoming and safe school hub. The concept of the commons I hinted at earlier. The idea is it's a central hub in the heart of the school. It will be centered pretty much, yes, oh, okay, thank you. It will be centered around the lobby area that you just walked through, although that will be transformed into a more welcoming space. Arrayed around this central hub will be a bunch of student services, things like the cafeterias, things like the library and media center, or tutoring center, which we're going to rename the Student Resource Center. The tutoring center will be there, I just said that. Counselors will be arrayed along this, all student services, the IT help desk will be along this, so that students, like during lunch period, can go and access any of those services. They can see the nurse, they can see their social worker, they can see the counselor, without having to get a pass and go off into some other part of the building. So that's one of the reasons you do all of that. So it's more efficient during lunch. It also creates that space before and after school. We'll have lots of breakout spaces where students can gather for study, for discussion, for conversation, and for collaboration. The other thing that's really important about the commons concept is that it can be cordoned off from the rest of the building. It will be in the center of the building, so you can close off the north end of the building and the south end of the building from the commons. That makes it a much more manageable space that can be much more easily monitored for safety and security reasons. So it means that if I'm going to go to the library, I'm not wandering through the whole building to get there. But if I talk much more, I'm going to be stepping on the feet of our next presenter, which is Tom Powers, who's going to talk about the other two things on this bullet, or on this slide. And I'm going to sit here to run the thing.
Hello, my name is Tom. Can everybody hear me all right?
No, you need to be a lot closer to it.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yes. Great. My name is Tom. I'm an alumni of the school. I was born and raised in Oak Park, and I'm currently raising a family here. Before I talk about the Student Resource Center, I want to give you an idea of the problems it addresses. In order to do so, we're going to do a little light group exercise in active learning. I'm going to ask you to use your imagination and put yourself in the shoes of some of the students, or even better yet, imagine when you were in high school. Close your eyes if necessary. Remember the bad hair, the questionable fashion sense, the troublesome cliques. Hopefully you're there. So imagine being shushed while trying to work collaboratively in the dedicated after-school academic study space. Imagine wanting to work together with your friends on a school project during the school day and being told that the only dedicated space available for this is over capacity. Return to your study hall or the crowded cafeteria, a security guard might say to you. Imagine the awkwardness of puberty and trying to find a spot in that crowded cafeteria. A cafeteria described by other students as having the atmosphere of a prison mess hall. Imagine the turbulent home life you or possibly your classmates might endure, and for students in those situations, the need for stability that creates. Then imagine being ushered out of the building every day at 3:05 p.m. Finally, imagine the negative associations and perceptions it would create for you if you were ejected from the school at the end of the day and did not have a great place to go. These same situations just described were also revealed during interviews with over 30 student groups and countless faculty. For them, Imagine learned that the library, tutoring center, and informal balcony space are heavily used in well-like spaces, but they have limited capacity during the day. The tutoring center is open before and after school, but is not a functional space to provide both collaborative work and individual studies simultaneously. The tutoring center closes at 5:15 because in its current location it is not feasible for the campus safety department to monitor the entire academic wing of the school as necessary to keep it open longer. The library is the only space with dedicated space for group work. It closes at the end of the school day for the same security reasons. After school, students have insufficient space for study, collaboration, or even socializing. If they are not in organized activities or don't want to be sequestered in an uncomfortable institutional cafeteria, they are ushered out of the school at 3:05. These problems start to get solved in sequence one, beginning with the relocation of the library and tutoring center to the core of the building. The new Student Resource Center would be on 2 floors, located directly above us and anchor the student commons. This centralized hub is more easily secured for after-school use due to the smaller footprint. This in turn facilitates longer hours of access. The south cafeteria will be renovated and expanded to be more comfortable and inviting. Finally, the relocation of the library and the tutoring center to the Student Resource Center opens up a large footprint at the north end of the building for new classroom construction. This first critical step sets the stage for the reinvigoration of the academic of the wing. Steve will talk a little bit more about that later. Before I turn it over, just a quick note on safety. I want to say a few words about the other ways in which the Imagine plan enhances safety in OPRF beyond what was already discussed. Currently, many public-facing operations of the school are spread throughout the building. This is contrary to industry best practices for creating a secure school environment. The later sequences move these functions near to the main entrance in accordance with industry standard. The later sequences re-energize the Welcome Center to maintain current control over entry, but in a more functional, efficient, welcoming manner. The master plan envisions the Welcome Center as a gateway to the student commons, rather than just a traffic door. I'll turn over to Steve for academics.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me all right? All right, great. My name is Stephen Endries. I'm an Oak Park community resident and parent of 2 future Huskies. And I'll share with you a little bit what we learned about academics within the building. So when we talk to faculty, when we talk to students, when we talk to parents, there was one primary need that resurfaced again and again with regard to academics in our classroom spaces. And that was to have learning environments that are simply more flexible, that can be adapted to a wide variety of learning activities, instructional goals, and the needs of different types of learners. Now, our current classrooms were primarily designed back in an era when access to information itself was pretty scarce. So if you were a student 50 to 100 years ago when our classrooms were designed, you got most of your learning through direct instruction, what we politely today would call a lecture. So the teacher would be there to impart their knowledge and information to you as a student. And the classrooms, by and large throughout the building, reflect this in their design. Many of them still have those little tablet arm chairs where you squeeze yourself in and you have the little writing surface. They're all pointing toward the front of the classroom, where there's an instructor station, much like this one, where I, as the teacher, would have access to a blackboard or to presentation facilities. The entire design of the room is set up to support a teacher-centric model of education. It's set up so that I can share what I've learned with all of you. That is essentially a factory model. It's an assembly line of learning for students. So what's wrong with that model? Why doesn't that work today? Well, for one thing, it's a one-size-fits-all model. We all don't learn at the same rate as each other. If you're in a classroom, you might be sitting next to one student who is more gifted than you, has greater aptitude for this particular subject. And you might be sitting on the other side with a student who is struggling to keep up with everyone else. Each of us has different interests and goals in life that we want to pursue, but this one-to-many instruction doesn't support that. Most importantly, though, research shows again and again that students learn best when we are actively involved in our learning process. And if you're sitting there listening to me or listening to someone else speak, that's essentially a passive process. It's a process that reinforces facts and figures and basic understanding, but doesn't help encourage the communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity that we expect of our students today. Well, assuming all of that is well and good, how does this master plan address any of this? Well, in sequence 1 alone, with the relocation of the library that Tom mentioned, it vacates the northwest corner of the 2nd and 3rd floors to make room for 12 brand new classrooms. And being along the perimeter of the building, those classrooms will have access to daylight, which research shows yields better student outcomes. These rooms would be equipped with flexible furniture that moves and can be repurposed to support differentiated instruction. Students with difficulties on one side and students engaged in more challenging activities on another. They can support group work and team activities and embrace collaborative technology that allows everyone in the room to share, not just the precious person who happens to have access to the cable. In addition to those 12 new classrooms, sequence 1 alone refurbishes 64 additional classrooms with these same sorts of features. And if we get the video to show at some point, our business incubator, which is currently here in the building, is a model of what those rooms might look like. These rooms empower our students to take an active role in their learning through working in teams on substantive real-world challenges. If you look at the color coding on the diagrams, the classrooms get reorganized into neighborhoods by subject matter. So for example, science and mathematics can be on the same floor, next to each other, where they can support each other's curriculum and engage in interdisciplinary learning opportunities. This sort of model of renovating classrooms, neighborhooding them together, continues throughout the subsequent sequences until virtually all the classrooms and labs are upgraded with these sorts of capabilities. And as many classrooms as possible are placed on the perimeter of the building for that daylight access. It's important to note that we can do all of this renovation, all of this shuffling around within the footprint of the building. There's no need for trailers or temporary classrooms to be parked on the football field. I'd also like to point out that these design principles are not really nice to have sorts of things. These are scientific best practices that have been written up and published in educational literature and have been tested as effective at other educational institutions like ours across the country. And in these cases, they've been shown to raise learning outcomes for all of the students, but particularly to improve the learning for the most marginalized students. The students that are struggling, the students who are underperforming, have the most to gain through this sort of program. As Lynn mentioned, we're not under any sort of illusion that building new classrooms is magically going to fix all of the disparities based on race or disability or socioeconomic status. But these classroom design principles have been shown through research to improve outcomes for all students and reduce the predictability of those sorts of demographics in how students succeed in the school.
Thank you very much, Steve. We are going to go ahead and do the video next because it affects, we're doing the video next because there's some spaces that are referenced by the next few speakers that are shown in detail in the video.
My name is Kim O'Donnell, and I am an Oak Park resident and a mother of 3 children under the age of 4 who will eventually be here at OPRF. I'm going to talk to you about some of the facilities needs of the Special Education Division. We found the needs of the special education facilities are some of the greatest. We have listened to program chairs, teachers, and teaching assistants, and they are really begging us for help. Their students are not being served equitably by the outdated facilities in which they learn. Sequence 1 plans to address 3 of the major needs of the special education department. First is the team program space. Second is the special ed office and conference spaces. And third is the specific location of these spaces. The TEAM program is one of 4 special education programs at OPRF. TEAM serves the students with some of the most profound and severe disabilities in the school, and yet it is one of the spaces that is most lacking in functionality. Many of the students in the TEAM program use wheelchairs, and yet the space is not ADA accessible. As you will see in the video, hopefully, this space does not even have an ADA accessible bathroom within it. This means that students who soil their pants have to walk through a public hallway to get to a bathroom to get changed. And as you will see, it is a long hallway to get there. All of the spaces in the TEAM program are deficient in functionality, extremely outdated, and do not provide enough space for all of the students in the program. Moreover, the TEAM program and other specific special education programs need to be located near a dedicated entrance on the first floor so that students can easily exit and enter the building efficiently and safely. Second, the SPED conference and office spaces need to be addressed. The number of students receiving SPED services climbed from 620 to 829 this year. All of these students need multiple IEP meetings a year, and currently the school only has a handful of conference rooms for planning and holding these meetings. The SPED conference and office spaces need to be located near the main entrance so that families and outside professionals can easily attend meetings and to keep the school safe and secure. They also need to be adjacent to SPED learning spaces to reduce lost instructional time. In sequence 1 of the master plan, we are proposing the following components that will address the needs that I have just mentioned. Sequence 1 includes new spaces for the TEAM program that have been redesigned and renovated to fully meet the students' needs. Second, it renovates and reconfigures SPED office spaces and includes sufficient conference spaces located near the main entrance and adjacent to SPED learning spaces. And third, the TEAM space and other specific SPED programs will be located close to a dedicated entrance on the first floor. In later sequences, the plan relocates other SPED program facilities so they are proximate enough to SPED offices and meeting spaces for efficiency, but dispersed enough to avoid segregation. The most important benefit of all of this is that sequence 1 of the master plan begins the process which will allow all students to move about the school with dignity, and it begins to provide us with an equitable learning environment for the students with the highest needs at OPRF. And I'll pass it over to Ellen.
Hi, I'm Ellen Pimentel. I'm an Oak Park resident and parent of 3 recent OPRF graduates. So I'm talking about the south end of the building, and to begin with, what are the problems that we are trying to solve there? These are the facilities used by physical education, athletics, and many extracurricular activities. The main sections at this end of the building are more than 90 years old and in overall poor condition due to age and heavy use. We identified numerous shortcomings that hinder the ability to efficiently run OPRF's programs there. We can lump them into 3 types of issues: capacity, efficiency, and functionality. So in terms of capacity, athletic and PE facilities are used every period of the day, but they are also used from early in the morning before school until late at night after school, because the shortage of usable spaces versus the number of groups that need to use them forces some of these groups into those extra hours, which cuts into study, sleep, and family time for students. Another example, in terms of capacity, the field house looks really big, but it's too small for the track team, and it's too large for other competitions that are held there. So many groups are crowded in there that students literally are running into each other at times. In terms of efficiency, one example, and there are many, having 2 separate pools results in splitting up PE and PE sections and athletic teams so that teachers and coaches cannot collaborate during class or practice. They're in opposite sides of the building. Locker rooms are often not adjacent to these spaces, leading to lost instructional time as students have to travel between them. An example of one of the many functionality issues that we found, we have multiple dance groups at OPRF. They have no dedicated dance space that has an appropriate floor to prevent injuries that are unique to dancers. They're in rooms with pillars in the middle of them, which is obviously a safety hazard as you're dancing, or don't have enough mirrors, for example, for dancers to see what they're doing. As I mentioned, these facilities are among the most heavily used classrooms in the school. The new PE is not the gym class of old that many of us might think about. Now the focus is on teaching lifelong fitness and wellness skills. Physical fitness lowers stress and is shown to reduce the risk of dementia later in life, and that's what they're focusing on, is those kind of long-term skills. But overcrowding, dysfunctional spaces, and inefficiencies of organization limit the abilities of the PE staff to adequately pursue their current curriculum. And research shows that participation in extracurricular activities, including athletics, boosts students' feelings of connection to the school, which has already been mentioned, especially among students who otherwise don't feel connected. Participation in these activities is also associated with higher academic performance, both in national research and in data from OPRF itself for their students. As a result, a goal of the school has been to further raise participation in such activities among students here, especially among the most vulnerable populations, but capacity, efficiency, and functionality problems limit participation as it is now and make increasing participation among the student body difficult. Simply fixing these facilities in place is not a reasonable or cost-effective option, we found, due to their age and the very inefficient use of space as they currently exist. Our question, how to meet the needs of our students but within the same space? And the answer was to create a new 4-story PE and performing arts space that is more efficiently organized within the current footprint, so not having to bump the school out. And do so by spreading the disruption and the cost over the length of the plan across sequences 2, 3, and 5, so not all in one sequence. For example, the current field house is 3 stories of air, when field houses only require 2 stories of space. Building a new 2-story field house also allows for a 2-story 3-court competition gym on the floors below. And this proposed plan uses space so much more efficiently that it can additionally house new band, orchestra, chorus, and black box theater facilities, which you are going to hear about next.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Audrey Williams-Lee. I'm an 18-year Oak Park resident. I have a senior at the high school and a 5th grader at Man. And I want to speak with you about performing arts. So our music facilities are really in need of renovation for safety, for capacity, for accessibility, for functionality. In the video, it shows how overcrowded those spaces are, that you find students having to practice in the hallways. We also have issues with air volume as well as sound dampening in those rooms. Sound production is a newer program amongst the fastest growing class that we have. These classes reach students who are at risk of dropping out and really engages them and brings them back into the school community. But we don't have the space to offer what we're able to actually do. The Black Box Theater, also called Studio 200, presents both safety and sanitation issues. The Black Box is 2 stories and it does not have a walkway above the stage that allows for the faculty and for the students to actually safely adjust the lighting. There are also no bathroom facilities for students to use during performances, and I can tell you they get pretty creative about how to make that work. Stagecraft is where we build the sets for the productions. And we have 3 performance spaces. We have the main auditorium, we have the little theater, and then we have the Black Box Theater, which I just mentioned. The spaces produce 9 full shows a year, but they're also used for more than 200 school events. Because there's not enough space in the stagecraft shop, you end up having to build the sets on stage. And this ends up interfering with a lot of other events that are going on in the area. And because of inadequate storage, it's very difficult to reuse sets, which means that we have to waste materials and add more money because sets aren't able to be used again. The master plan addresses all of these needs by creating a 2-story performing arts facility in sequence 3 in the middle. As Ellen mentioned, it meets the PE needs, but it also meets performing arts needs. So from a performing arts standpoint, on the music side, we gained 2-story classrooms for orchestra, for choir, and for band, as well as individual ensemble rooms and rooms for instruction. And these are needed both for teaching and for kids to prepare for state standards. The expansion of sound production will give us flexible space that can help meet our current needs, but also help us plan for future needs that we don't quite know what those might look like. Having a new black box theater will address the needs of safety and sanitation, which I mentioned. We would have adequate restroom facilities, and we'd also have new changing facilities so that students don't have to keep using the janitor's closet that they currently use for changing facilities within the black box theater. And then finally, the 2-story stagecraft will address the safety concerns. And it also means that students and faculty don't have to drag sets, materials, etc. back and forth between the production areas to set things up. I do want to note that the master plan also addresses other art areas. So for example, in police sequence 1, we add facilities for visual arts, and we add some additional visual arts rooms in future sequences, and we also add new facilities for family and consumer sciences. The last thing I'd like to leave you with is, if you look in the paper, look online, there's a perception that many of the recommendations that are being made are about wants rather than needs. And what I want everyone to keep in mind is that we have to recognize that what is needed and what is going to improve the learning environment is determined by the receiver, by the user, not by the observer. And the team spent many months talking to students and faculty to understand what is really going to improve the learning environment and how might facilities make that happen. I'm really proud of the work that we've done. It's been very thoughtful, it's been very thorough, and again, I appreciate you coming out tonight. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Hello, can everyone hear me? My name is Sarah Stazak Miller. I graduated from this high school in '93. I just had my 25th year reunion a couple weeks ago. My mom taught at this school for about 20 years, and my oldest will be a student here in about 6 years. So I've been here a long time, and I'm really grateful for that. So I'm sure, like many of you, I've been watching the America to Me series, and in watching it, there's one quote that's really stayed with me for the past couple of weeks, and that quote was when a student said that this school was built for white people. And I've spent a lot of time in this building over the last year, and I have to say that that's not, I think it's a pretty accurate statement, but it's really led me to think about who this building was built for and who it wasn't built for. And I don't think it was built for students of color. It was not built for students with disabilities, and it was not built for students that are LGBTQ. So I think one of the things that I've been really proud of as part of this group is that it has been a priority of the Imagine group to really emerge from this process with a plan that is reflective of the needs of the entire student body, not just one small section of it. So two of the populations that I really want to talk to you about that we've really addressed through the master plan are students with disabilities and also transgender students. So first of all, one of our priorities has been to make this a fully accessible building. So there's obviously been, the last major, I know there's been other renovations from the past 50 years, but the last major renovation 50 years ago, there's been a lot of changes, and we really value educating students with disabilities in the school and provide an amazing opportunity for these students. So in going through the school, I think there's really a range of problems with our facilities. The one, which you will see a lot in the south end of the building, there's no elevator on that side of the building. And there's some rooms that you can't access at all. You cannot get to the wrestling room if you're in a wheelchair. You cannot get to the green room if you're in a wheelchair. And there's several classrooms in this building that you cannot get to at all. I've had teachers tell me that they've had students show up in a wheelchair to a science class and they can't get in because there's stairs to that science class. The problem is that these students feel unwelcome, it's inequitable, and quite frankly, it's a safety issue as well. When you can't get when you can't get students in and out of a room with a gurney or whatever it is, if there's an emergency situation. As you'll see in the video, which I'm told is going to be playing after this, there are spaces in this building that you can access, but there's kind of these temporary makeshift ramps that they put in that look like they've been temporary, but they've been there for several years. So you can get there, but it's very awkward, very difficult to use them. And then finally, just the way a lot of our classrooms are set up, there's a lot of permanent fixtures. They're really inflexible, and so students with disabilities can't really get around. So when you can get into a classroom, you're kind of relegated to one little part of that classroom instead of being able to move freely. And as Steve talked about what we're talking about with all the flexible rooms as it comes to classrooms, we would address it there. So the master plan really addresses this in every sequence. In sequence 2, there's an elevator put on the south end of the building. In sequence 3, there's an additional elevator that's put in the north end of the building. And I will tell you, our students describe our elevators as coffins. They're very old, very outdated, very small. So there'd be a new elevator put in the north wing as well. In all the sequences, there would be widening of the doors. It's really difficult to get wheelchairs through these doors, especially in and out of the building. Removing permanent fixtures so that all students can maneuver around them. And our result is a building that's fully accessible to all students, regardless of disability. The other group of students I want to talk about is just our all gender facilities. We do have some here. There's a couple issues with them. The first is location. It wasn't a thought out process that this is the best place for an all gender bathroom. These were bathrooms that were already there, that were converted, and quite frankly, they're not in the best locations. So what you hear from students is that they're missing class, or in other cases, that they're not going to the bathroom all day. This matters because this is a health issue for these students that don't go to the bathroom all day, and they're missing class time. The other real issue is, again, they're kind of left, a lot of these bathrooms are kind of in a haphazard space. In one of them, a urinal has been ripped out and there's exposed pipes. They're not very welcoming spaces for these students that really need that space and serve their needs. And I will say, one of the most impactful parts of this process for me has been talking to students, and they know this is an issue. When I ask them just blankly, what is inequity at this school? More than one student has told me, I get to use a locker room, and there's other kids in my class that have to run into a bathroom, and then I see them in class, and they're 5 or 10 minutes late because they had to go to run to a bathroom and change there because there's no space in the locker rooms for them. So we have addressed this in the master plan in sequence 2 as part of the renovation to the south end of the building. New all-gender locker rooms are being put there, and I would like to emphasize the fact this is for all students. Privacy is an issue for all students, and it's really important for all of them. And in sequence 3, we add all gender restrooms on all floors of the academic side of the wing so that they're accessible for students and can be used. And the result with that is a building that's inclusive and respectful of the unique needs of the LGBT community, which I think is hugely important in any school, particularly this one.
But before we open the floor for questions, I did want to talk a little bit about the costs that are associated with this facilities plan. On your handout, you'll see cost estimates for phases 1, 2, and 3, and not for phases 4 and 5, and that's caused a lot of questions. In providing this information, we're following the advice of the architects and construction managers who are consulting on this master planning process. As you heard at the beginning, a master plan is a long-term and evolving roadmap, so these professionals advise clients to start with cost estimates for the phases they hope to execute in the near future. As we look further out, we're advised to wait for estimates on those costs in the later phases because they can be so far down the road, in this case up to 10 years down the road, they're likely to change in scope before they're designed, built, or financed. And that's what we've done here. The estimated costs we're providing tonight are just under $145 million, and we know that is a lot of money. And it's a lot of money because there are a lot of problems and issues to be addressed, which hopefully we've been able to show you a little bit tonight. There's a lot of work to be done, and as we do the work to address these problems and needs, it really we'll see a ton of benefits to be realized for our students and for our communities. And so now it's time for your questions, and I'm going to turn it over to our moderator.